And then Louie is like, the counteroffer is basically the opposite of all that. He picks her up, he drops her off, it's a dinner date, and they're alone. But then on top of that, he adds, and you have to call me Stallion at least once during the date in front of 2 or more people. Louie, this is ridiculous. Now, Elaine's gonna end up agreeing to this, but she does think it's dirty of him. And she's not wrong, that's for sure. Welcome back to another episode of The Rank. I'm John. Today we're going to be ranking the next episode of Taxi. Now, for those of you who are new to the show, I'm going to give you a brief agenda here. We start off with the potent notables, which are just a couple interesting facts or tidbits that I found out about the episode or series. Then I do the episode overview, which is just me talking about everything that happened in the episode, so spoiler alert. And then I do the rank, the namesake of the show, where I rank the episode in 5 categories on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, all to find out what are the best sitcoms of all time. And today, we're going to be ranking the 19th episode of the 2nd season, titled Shut It Down, Part 1. Written by Howard Gewurtz and Ian Praiser, and of course directed by Jimmy Burrows. Alright, so let's find out how this one stacks up, starting with the potent notables.
Potent notables.
So this 41st episode of Taxi was released Tuesday, January 29th, 1980. Taxi dropped to 12th this week in the ratings, going from a 25.7 to a 25.2 rating, but it was still the second best show of the night for ABC. And our other potent notable, and last potent notable, is that Mary Lou Henner said this was her favorite episode of all time. Well, this one and part 2. She said that the reason it was her favorite was because of the negotiating scene with Danny DeVito, specifically the what's going to happen on the date. And then she finished it by saying, but anytime working with Danny. And then she sort of looked off. You could tell that meant she enjoyed working with Danny. Those are the potent notables. Let's go to the episode overview. So we open the episode with Tony coming in hot. He's really pissed off. But why? What happened? Well, while he's driving the cab, he found out his brakes didn't work. And he's ready to take it out on the mechanic. He's gonna beat somebody up. But before he does, Alex and the others convince him to tell them more about what happened and what happened to the car. And what happened to the car? He ran it into a pole. And this leads to the first decent joke, because Alex is gonna be like, why didn't you use the emergency brake? And Tony's like, that's for parking. Which, right away, that actually made me laugh. But then I felt awkward for laughing because none of the audience, the live studio audience, were laughing at that point. They waited to laugh until Alex was like, and emergencies. That was what made them laugh. Now, I'm not saying the reaction wasn't funny or anything, but I genuinely do not understand what the live audience laughs at with this show. I don't know. Anyway, they convinced Tony not to go after the poor mechanics. After all, they can only work with what they've been given, right? It's management's fault. Enter Louie. Now, Louie, who wonders whether or not he left his fly down because everybody's staring at him, hears the complaint and says he's gonna do something about it. Now, he doesn't do this all the time, but he's gonna write a report. And when the drivers say, that'll do nothing, you write reports all the time and nothing ever happens, he's like, you're right, I need to do more for this. I'm gonna put drive defensively stickers on all the cabs. But his attempts to ameliorate the crew don't work. And then they start to intimidate him, which felt really weird. Like they block him from getting in his cage, which was fine. But then there's a scene where Bobby is looming over him and it just feels like unnecessarily creepy. Then we get to a point where I genuinely, once again, do not understand what the audience is laughing at. Louie runs away and they start chasing him and the audience is just eating it up. And I mean, it wasn't bad or anything, but then we get this Looney Tunes thing where he goes in a door and then there's a secret passage and he comes out the door on the bottom floor and the audience is just cracking up and I'm like, what? Why? I feel like Antonio is going to be like, that was funny. And I'm like, no, maybe there's something wrong with me. Either way, he gets away from them and he gets back in his cage. And so he wins the battle. But will he win the war? Because now the cabbies are like, okay, we need to talk to the shop steward. We got to go to the union. Problem is, none of them know who the shop steward is. So instead of trying to really figure it out, they go, well, let's just elect a new one. Now, I get it. It's just a sitcom, right? But is there really nothing official that they have to do for this? They just sort of start trying to figure out who it should be. And then Jim's like, hey, you remember that tall guy, that tall redheaded guy that works on the weekends? And Alex is like, yeah, Jack, or whatever he said. Why, do you want to nominate him? And Jim's just like, no, I just didn't remember who he was. Jim's great. But right after that, Tony's going to nominate himself because he's like, I'm mad enough that I could actually get something done. And then they all unanimously agree that he should be the shop steward. And I'm just like, have they met Tony? Who could possibly think that Tony would be a good idea to be shop steward? Well, it doesn't work out as you might expect, but it's because Louie charms Tony. He's being super nice to him and he's offering to let him come in his cage. Tony's like, oh, you never let me in the cage. And he sort of compliments him while doing so. Of course, there's a limit for Louie, right? At some point, he just gets fed up with trying to get him in the cage and just goes, all right, right foot, left foot. Anyway, Louie schmoozes Tony and essentially manipulates him about all the fun, fancy stuff he's going to get to do now that he's an executive. And of course, Tony ends up leaving the cage all smiling, feeling like $1 million. And then he sits down and everybody's staring at him and he realizes, I fucked up. And all the cabbies are looking at him all annoyed. And I'm just like, you should be annoyed with yourselves. You elected him, you morons. So they have a recall vote right away, and of course recall Tony. We first didn't know who the shop steward was. We elected one, and then 5 minutes later we've recalled him, and then another 2 minutes goes by and we've got a new one. But the best part of that scene is that they start going, all right, who's going to be nominated? We're accepting nominations. And Jim immediately nominates Tony. And Alex is like, why would you nominate Tony? We just recalled him, basically. And Jim says, nothing beats experience. Bobby's going to be like, I got a better idea. Let's walk out. But Elaine's like, whoa, hold your horses, right? We don't want to walk out, because then that just gives them a reason to like fire us or whatever. And then of course they all like, okay, well then you should be the shop steward. And she's like, no, not me. Oh, me? Really? Okay. You know, she's all excited to do it, but it's her turn to talk to Louie, right? Well, she doesn't want to talk to Louie, so she's like, I'm going to go straight to Louie's boss. I'm going to go to Mackenzie. So she goes up the stairs in the garage, and we get a scene where sort of everybody's just staring up at the second floor in the garage. So then Louie comes over too, and we're seeing his back, and he's sort of acting all happy. He knows nothing's going to come of this. But Jim's going to go up to Alex. He's going to be like, man, the tension is killing me. Alex is like, I know, right? And then Jim's just like, yeah, okay, see you tomorrow. I don't know why that makes me laugh, but I think it's the idea that the tension is so bad that it's killing him, but it only lasts for like a second. And he's just like, okay, I'm good now. But Louie's right, because Elaine's going to come back down the stairs and be like, Mackenzie didn't give up anything, so we're going to go on strike. And I'm just like, isn't that what Bobby said that they should do? I mean, how is this different? So they all march out of the garage chanting, shut it down. And Louie's excited. He's like, I'm going to hire some scabs. And he starts off right away with the newspaper boy who comes in to deliver a newspaper. He's like, you're gonna drive a cab now. And this kid looks like he's like 12. And right after that is when we get like an old school commercial break. And when we come back, we see that Louie has hired a bunch of scabs. And the whole joke here is that they're old. And it's super funny. That's sarcasm for those of you who are just listening and not watching. Now, I might be being a little hard on the episode because it wasn't bad or anything, but I'm annoyed at the live audience that was just cracking up for this. Like, come on, people, make them write a better joke. So soon after, all the old guys and the little kid that he hired that was the newspaper boy leave. And then Bobby comes in. Anyway, turns out that Louie actually has a message for Bobby. It was from Bobby's agent. And he's like, hey, you've got a really good chance at a part in this movie. So make sure you come down for the audition or whatever it was. Bobby's like, oh, this is great. When's the audition? And Danny's like, 3 p.m. yesterday. Now that's the kind of mean-spirited Louie joke I enjoy. But what's weird to me is that not just Bobby is going to come in, all the rest of the cabbies are going to come in. They just sort of come in. I don't think that happens during a strike. I mean, I could be wrong. I've never been on strike, but I'm pretty sure they don't go into the building that they're striking from. But whatever, we need some exposition, right? And we don't want to do it in a whole new set. You know, gotta save some money. Elaine's gonna come in and she's gonna be like, things are going great. We got a hearing set up. But Louie's like, nope, you got no chance to win. Why does Louie think that? Well, it's because he's been cooking the books while they've been out striking. And now the books show that the Sunshine Cab Company spends more money on repair and maintenance than any other cab company in New York City. And Bobby's like, nobody is going to be gullible enough to believe that. And Louie takes him up on the challenge. So who does he go up to prove that there would be somebody gullible enough to believe this? Jim, of course. And he says, hey, Jim, Sunshine Cab Company spends more on maintenance and repair than any cab company in the city. And Jim replies, strike worked. Everyone's going to head back out to the picket line, except Alex. He's going to hang back because this is the part of the episode where Alex is going to make a speech to Louie about God and eternal damnation. That it would be on Louie's head if a cabbie died driving one of these cars. And somehow this gets through to Louie, and he agrees to negotiate with Elaine. But Elaine's going to come in and she's going to lay out the cabbie's demands. They actually seem pretty easy to acquiesce to, really. First, they want him to retire all cabs that have been in service for more than 5 years. Second, they want new brakes for all the cabs. Seems reasonable. Third, a 10% increase in the maintenance and repair budget. And finally, a new mechanic for every shift. That one I could kind of see him pushing back on. But Louie just agrees to it. But there's a catch, of course. To do all this, Elaine has to agree to 4 days in a cabin with just Louie, which she, of course, walks away from. But as she's walking away, he goes down to a weekend, and then he goes down to just a date. Just one date to get all your demands met. It's kind of a long bit where they're negotiating the terms of the date. Now, Mary Lou Henner loved this I was sort of ambivalent to it. It was fine. She wants to not sit at the same table with him. She wants it to be a lunch date in which they meet at the restaurant and depart from the restaurant separately. And then Louie is like, the counteroffer is basically the opposite of all that. He picks her up, he drops her off, it's a dinner date, and they're alone. But then on top of that, he adds, and you have to call me Stallion at least once during the date in front of 2 or more people. Louie, this is ridiculous. Now, Elaine's gonna end up agreeing to this, but she does think it's dirty of him. And she's not wrong, that's for sure. Also, what about Xena? Isn't he dating her? Like, what the hell, Louie? But it's also just really gross in general. And Elaine's gonna confront him about it by saying, you're taking something that's decent in her to accommodate something that's indecent in him. And how do you feel about that? And then we get a crazy line. Louie's gonna say, horny as all get out. First of all, wow. But secondly, I had no idea that as all get out was a phrase that was used in the 70s. I mean, technically this came out in 1980, but whatever, it's the same. I remember my girlfriend, now wife, saying that to me almost 20 years ago, and it was the first time I had ever heard it. I also remember thinking it was really dumb. Like, what does that even mean? As all get out? That's just not even a sentence. Of course, I ended up using it and liking it, but I had no idea it had been around for so long. Anyway, that's the whole episode as we get a to be continued at the end. Let's find out how this one ranked.
A rank.
So the rank is where I rank the episode based on 5 categories: story, acting, dialogue, episode coherence, and character relatability. I rank it on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best, and then we have a laugh counter where I tally up the amount of times the episode made me laugh out loud. 1 point per laugh out loud gets added to the score. But before I dive into the rankings here, I just want to say if you're enjoying this episode, please leave a like down below. It really does help me out. But without further ado, first category is story, and the story here is neat and encapsulated, even though it's a 2-parter. The cabbies in the garage are worried about their safety because of the repair and maintenance of the cabs themselves, and they decide to strike to get better working conditions. It's pretty straightforward and it ends with a natural conclusion, even though it's a 2-parter. It's really well done, so I gave it a 4.5. Next category is acting. The acting is really good in this one. Mary Lou Henner is better than normal, though still not fantastic. Now, I suppose this was during a time when really good actors were in movies and everybody else was on TV, so I suppose maybe I should be rating on a curve here. Actually, one thing I want to highlight is Jeff Conaway playing intimidating to Danny DeVito actually made me worried for Danny DeVito. Now, I would say that's probably good, right? Because he was supposed to be acting intimidating, but it wasn't in like a, oh man, this guy is like so powerful or so intimidating. It was like, is he actually a serial killer type of way? So anyway, I gave it a 4. That brings us to dialogue, and this was a funny episode. The pace was good. We didn't have any super long monologues. However, it should have and could have been funny. It was still very good. It feels like they're always on the cusp of being really funny and they just never quite get there. I gave it a 4. So that brings us to episode coherence. And there are a few things here that seem incongruous. Like the election of the shop steward felt like it couldn't possibly be true. Also, they're outside picketing, but they come in to get coffee and stuff. I don't know. They're a little bit bigger than quibbles, but they weren't that bad. So I gave it a 3.5. So let's go to character relatability. And I thought this episode was pretty relatable, though it was really hard for me to relate to Louie at the end of this one. I just couldn't relate to his throw it all away to go on a date with Nardo thing. I mean, he's dating Xena. There's no guarantee that anything good comes out of the date. Plus, what if she were to report this? I would imagine it wouldn't turn out well for him. But that's the only thing, though. Everybody else was good. Everything else was pretty relatable. So I gave it a 4.25. So that brings us to the laugh counter. So we don't need a huge laugh counter to keep it in the top 3 tiers because it did get decent ratings and it got me 11 times. So there you have it. That puts us at a grand total of a 31.25, which puts it in the I'd watch it again tier. But as for the series average, that moves up a little bit to a 25.9, keeping it firmly into mediocre. Now, if you're ranking along with me, please drop your score in the comments because I'd be really curious to see what you had, especially the laugh counter. Because I want to know, am I crazy? Is the live audience right? Or am I right and the live audience is nuts? But anyway, thanks for listening and or watching. Check out the other Taxi episodes on my channel or any other sitcom or movie episodes that I've put up. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. You can email me directly at john@therankedpodcast.com. You can also become a patron at patreon.com/therankedpodcast and I will shout you out. But I will leave you with this. Why did Louie end up telling Alex that he aligns with Satan? Because they're both horny as all get out.
What a terrible joke!
I'm not proud of it. I'm not proud of it. But Bobby's going to be like, I got a better idea. I hope we don't leave that.